These situations is as common as anxiety about future impromptu interactions. Both can derail our best-laid plans for presenting ourselves as the polished, passionate, responsive communicators we hope to be. Blinded by the spotlight. I'd like you to try something. Cross your arms in front of you as you normally would. Now, uncross them and cross them again, this time folding the other arm on top. Notice how weird this feels? For a split second, you're not quite sure what to do with your arms. Your mind becomes detached from your body, and you feel confused, uncertain, and maybe just a tiny bit panicked. Being put on the spot and asked to communicate can feel like this. You often know what you think and intend to say, just like you know how to cross your arms. But when the setting changes, you're in a social situation and the pressure is on, you can feel confused, overwhelmed, threatened. Your fight or flight response kicks in, your heart pounds, your limbs shake, and you get hit with what I call plumbing reversal. What normally is dry, your palms, becomes moist with sweat, and what is normally moist, your mouth, goes dry. As you struggle to recover, you stammer, ramble, hesitate. You veer off on tangents. You stare at your feet or shrink down in your seat. You fidget. You overwhelm your audience with ums and uhs. You might even freeze up entirely. At the 2014 Consumer Electronics Show, Michael Bay, director of Armageddon and the Transformers franchise, among other films, had trouble with a teleprompter as he was giving a presentation for a corporate sponsor. Forced to improvise, Bay was at a near total loss for words, even though he was discussing a subject he knew well, his own movies. After fumbling for a couple of moments, it was all he could do to mutter a quick apology and walk off stage. One commentator wryly remarked that they hadn't cringed like that since Transformers 2. Impromptu speaking isn't my thing. Bay later explained his performance that day by saying, "I guess live shows aren't my thing." Too often, people presume the ability to improvise on the fly is a matter of personality or inborn talent. Some people have a knack for it, others don't. We tell ourselves we're just not gifted at thinking and speaking spontaneously. I'm shy, we say, or I'm a numbers person. Worse, some of us conclude we're not smart or good enough. Sometimes a single disastrous episode can convince us for life that we're bad communicators. Irma, a librarian in her late 60s, yearned to deliver impromptu remarks at her beloved granddaughter's upcoming wedding. But sadly, the thought of standing up and speaking sent chills down her spine. When I asked about her fears, she told me they started decades earlier when she was in high school. She had responded to a question from her teacher, and he embarrassed her in front of the entire class by exclaiming, "That's the worst, most stupid answer I've ever had a student say in my class." The experience not only prevented Irma from participating actively in meetings and other social encounters, it became a turning point in her life. She chose to become a research librarian precisely because she knew she'd rarely, if ever, have to engage in any stressful, unplanned communication on the job. Think about that for a moment. Irma put massive constraints on her life simply because she feared a repeat of a single impromptu speaking debacle. As extreme as that might sound, many of us do something similar. Past failures make us acutely aware of our inability to respond well, and we dread having to speak spontaneously again. On subsequent occasions, a vicious cycle can kick in. Our nerves lead us to do even worse, which in turn makes us even more nervous, further inhibiting our ability to respond. At some point, the anxiety we feel becomes too much. With the "I can't do this" soundtrack playing in our heads, we shrink into the shadows, keeping our potentially great ideas and contributions to ourselves. We find seats in the back of the lecture hall or at the far end of the conference table. We disappear on Zoom calls by switching off our cameras and muting our mics. Our professed and actual inability to communicate in impromptu settings can devastate our careers and lives. Years ago, when I worked for a small startup, a colleague of mine, whom I'll call Chris, had a great idea for how to position the company's big product. Since his idea was fairly radical, requiring a shift in our strategy, it came under considerable scrutiny. When others asked